Welcome back to Transfers Talk Tennessee Sports. I'm Katie Mack.
And I'm Jules Spear.
Today we're going to be recapping women's basketball, swim and dives SEC championships, and talk a little bit of NIL. So without further ado, how have things been going on the basketball court, Joel?
Things went pretty smoothly. We went 1-1. We won against Vanderbilt, and then we came up a little short against LSU.
That LSU game was really, really impressive, though. I mean, y'all were really, really strong through the third quarter, and you know, it was definitely a bummer to see you guys fall short to the defending national champions. But talk to me a little bit about how that game went for you guys.
You know, first off, we have to, give a shout out to our fans. We had like 15,000 fans there. We had a lot of supporters.
Insane.
We competed, like you said, through three quarters for the most part. Came up a little short in the fourth quarter. I believe LSU went on a 15-2 run. They were making shots. Haley Van Lith had a very productive day, I guess you can say. But, you know, they're a very good team, very competitive. They crashed the offensive rebounds very hard. It was a very physical game, as every SEC game is. You know, we learned from the game, and we're going to move on to our next opponent and hopefully see them again in SECs.
So A&M on Thursday, you guys have.
Yes,
So that's senior day, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's really, really exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be bittersweet, you know, for our seniors. Last time on the court in front of your fans.
Wow.
So it will be a lot of emotions, but I think, we lost earlier in the year to A&M, so this will be hopefully a little revenge game, yes.
That'll be awesome. Well, on to a better note, you guys had a really, really big rivalry win over Vandy the week before. So talk to me a little bit about that one.
Yeah, so we actually played at Vandy, and a lot of our fans came there too. And a funny thing, like, since it's my first year in the SEC, is like seeing the arena. It was like a auditorium, I guess you can say. It looked really like different than another arena, but seeing just a lot of orange and our fans supporting us, and it was very loud in there. It was really cool. And, you know, we honestly dominated the game from start to finish. We held the lead. We never were behind, and we got some good contributions from a lot of people.
Absolutely. And I personally was really, really excited to see Jillian Hollingshead playing as well as she's been, because I felt like she kind of disappeared for a little while, and then the last couple of games she's really, really been back in it, and she's been playing really, really well. So, you know, again, don't know her personally, but it's always great to see people coming back and playing well.
Yeah, it definitely is. Jill is, a key person for our team. You know, a post player that's very physical, that likes to face up, play back to the basket, and get a lot of rebounds for us and a lot of extra opportunities for us shooters with kick-out passes. So we're proud of her, and we know that her role is very important to our future.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's actually move on
to you, right?
So Swim and Dive just got back from SECs. We were in Auburn, Alabama for the last week, the whole week actually. It's a really, really long meet. It's a fantastic meet, like we were talking about in the last episode. And the Vols and Lady Vols actually did really, really well. Finished second in the team battle for the women, which was a little bit of a letdown, you know, given that Florida won. And it was definitely a little weird. It was really weird for me, I'm going to be honest, because, you know, like my two best friends from Florida are the team captains. And so I'm like secretly rooting for them. Like I want the two of y'all to do well, but the rest of the team crash and burn, you know? So it was definitely a little bit weird, but the Lady Vols did fantastic. You know, Mona McSherry had, she won the 100 and 200 breast, and she's won it every year since she was a sophomore. So that was like a really, really big deal.
And she's a senior now?
She's a senior
now. Oh, wow,
now.
that's a great way to go out.
Yeah, so she has, I think, the top 2 times in the 100 and 200 breast in the country going into NCAAs, which is really, really exciting. Another highlight I'd have to say was the women's 400 medley relay. They won that relay. That was the only relay that they beat Florida in, because Florida's relays are really, really strong. They've actually got a couple American Olympians on those relays, so they're really, really good. And Mona had the fastest 100 breast split in the history of swimming, so that was pretty cool to watch.
That's really good.
And on the men's side, you know, Jordan Crooks, like we talked about last time, you know, he won a couple of his events. I mean, he swam pretty well, even though he's, you know, kind of had a little bit of an off season. So it was really, really good to see him doing well. It was good to see, you know, a lot of Lady Vols kind of stepping up across the board and scoring a lot of big points at a challenging meet.
That's good. Yeah, I bet that's very tiring, because y'all were there for like, what, a week just swimming day after day after day after day.
Yeah, I mean, like you and I were kind of talking earlier, like it's so different. Like, with basketball, you guys can take a couple days and kind of recoup mentally, like after a loss or something, and move forward and, take the time to do that. Like with swim and dive, like you have maybe 20 minutes in between events.
Yeah, that's different.
Or you have like, the next morning you got to be ready to go again. So it's definitely a different turnaround for sure. So.
Well, congrats.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Next up, we will be talking about NIL and how there has been a lot of controversy in NIL, but also a lot of positive effects that it can have on athletes. So let's talk about that, Katie.
Yeah, so in recent news, Nick Saban, former Alabama head football coach, one might call him the GOAT. I know that's a little controversial being at Tennessee, but, it's kind of facts. He came out last week and had a lot to say about NIL and how it's been impacting college football specifically. One of the points that he made is what we have now is not college football. There's no longer student athletes, which, it impacts different sports differently, but football really, really significantly. What do you think?
I think there's two parts to it. I feel like he can have a point depending on how athletes use NIL to their ability. But also I see it as a good thing because I feel like, in this day and age, there's a lot of popular athletes, whatever sport you want to name, football, basketball, softball.
Totally.
And, before NIL, people were profiting off the NCAA was profiting off their names, whether that's, putting flyers up or selling different things of their name, image, and likeliness. So I believe it just depends on how the athlete uses it to their ability, honestly.
Totally. One of my friends who used to play basketball at NC State, she used to tell me that Zion Williamson, who played
at Duke,
at Duke, when he was going through taking classes, because I guess the NBA draft they can go after a year. He didn't do any like legitimate classes. He was taking like calligraphy classes, just to stay eligible. And like that, like I understand it from that perspective. Saban saying things like, these athletes can't prepare for the rest of their lives under NIL because they're so focused on their sport. It's just prioritizing their sport in that moment, and they're not thinking like, oh, what am I going to do 10, 20 years from now when my sport's over? And so I see it from that perspective.
That is
like
true.
there is an aspect where education is being, the emphasis on education, let's put it that way, is being lost a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like it's a fine line because, different athletes, I don't like to put people in boxes, but different athletes prioritize their education, whether they're making money or not. I know personally, whether I'm making or not, I still want to have a good education. And that might be a discussion too, whether it's like women athletes versus men athletes. Like, like with football, they can go 3 and done. With basketball, they can go 1 and done. With women's basketball, you have to be a certain age before you can even go to the draft. You can't go 1 and done. Obviously, the pay is different, so that's another discussion as well. But I think NIL can do really good stuff. Like Zion Williamson, he didn't get to benefit off of NIL, and you saw the whole world talking about his dunks and what he did for Duke basketball, and he wasn't able to benefit off of that. So him knowing he's going 1 and done and he was still going to get money in the NBA, I mean, I guess the classes and the education. But for a person that has to go to college for 4 years because they might not have a higher chance getting into professional athletics, then maybe they do have to prioritize their education a little bit more. But there are some people that do both. Like they can have NIL, but they can also prioritize their education because they know the benefits of both when the ball does. Because it's not going to keep bouncing forever. Obviously, when you're in the NBA and if you're very successful for a long time, like LeBron James, Stephen Curry, you have generational wealth. But that's not everybody, so you need to have something to fall back on.
Absolutely, and the whole concept of NIL is like a little bit foreign to me, being on swim and dive, because our sport is one of the ones that's not terribly impacted by it. If you're like an Olympian, swimming at UVA or one of those higher name, swimming schools, like you're going to make a ton of money. You've got these endorsements and stuff. But like your average, swimmer isn't going to make a ton. And the other piece of this is Tennessee brings in a lot of foreign athletes. Foreign athletes aren't allowed to benefit from the NIL collectives. So they can have deals with their home countries and things back there, but they can't benefit from anything here. So it's a whole different landscape, sport to sport. But one of the problems that Saban actually cites is the NIL collectives and NIL collectives being so out of control. So help me understand what NIL collectives do and how they function.
So from my understanding, most top teams or most colleges, I'd say most top college sports teams, like whether it's football, basketball, women's basketball, most definitely, and softball, you'll probably see collectives. And most of the time collectives are, donors that want to support athletes. But with NIL, you can't just get paid. It's not pay for play. You actually have to do work. So whether that's, donor dinners or getting out and doing events, signing autographs, you're actually getting paid for the work that you're doing.
Right. That makes sense. They kind of feel like the elephant in the room where nobody addresses like
but it happens.
Because like some athletes are making so much money.
Yeah.
I mean, I was on one of those websites the other day and I looked and I saw, Dalton Connect like 700K. I'm like, where is this money coming from? This is crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But these NIL collectives have completely blown up, and that, again, that's one of the things that Saban is citing as like a big problem with NIL, because no longer is it, these small deals, like they're millions and millions of dollars.
And it's impacting college as a whole, honestly. Being transfers, both of us, and with women's basketball being impacted heavily. At my last school, we didn't really have NIL collectives, and that's not really the main reason why I transferred. But we didn't have any NIL collectives on the women's side. Football did and men's basketball did, but when I came here, there is an NIL collective for a women's team. The Lady Vol Booster Club, which specifically emphasizes women athletes here, specific women athletes that they choose, obviously, but it just gives us a platform, honestly, opposed to other schools that might not have it. And that's another discussion about the level playing field. Like when transfers or recruits out of high school are going to schools, it's not just about education or the sport now, it's about what's the money looking like, which is crazy to think of, because obviously other schools, like football-wise, Alabama, maybe Tennessee, Florida, like just top teams that you hear of when you think of football, Georgia, a lot of SEC teams, they most likely have money. So now it's like, is the athlete prioritizing their education? Are they prioritizing the sport and where they're going to play the most, or are they prioritizing just how much money I'm going to get for going to this school?
Totally. And to your point about the transfer portal, I mean, like you were saying earlier, it all depends on what kind of a person the athlete is. What are they prioritizing? Like, are they prioritizing going and, enjoying that school, getting their education, representing that school, or are they prioritizing the money that they're making? Because that's one of the things that Saban's also concerned about, is that with the evolution of the transfer portal and how, like we benefited obviously from it. I'm not going to complain about the transfer portal. The transfer portal has helped me in a lot of ways. But, Saban's saying that this NIL thing has turned into this jumping ship year after year, to find the better money deals. And because of that, these programs are suffering because, head coaches aren't able to, build
Retain
from the
players,
ground up and, keep building year after year. It's this thing of like, oh, I'll be here for a year, but then if somebody offers me a better money deal, I'm gone, you know?
And that's a good thing you brought up, because I was thinking just one day, like, I wonder if, like, NIL is going to stay. Like, it's just here to stay. But now I'm thinking, obviously it's not pay to play, but are we going to start doing contracts like professional leagues? Like you said, people are staying for 1 year, 2 years, so are we going to start doing contracts if people are getting money now? Because now it's like, what are we doing? Because like you said, if you can't retain players, people are jumping ships. And obviously people have their own reasons for transferring. Totally. I don't think it's just specifically for money. But people have their own reasons for transferring. But like you said, if I was a coach, I don't know how I would be in this platform, like this sense of NIL.
It's funny you said that, because that was actually my next question. Do you think that NIL growing as exponentially as it has is the reason that Coach Saban could have prematurely retired?
Ooh, that's good. I honestly don't know, and I don't think so.
You don't think?
I don't think so, because he's at Alabama, which is known. like you say, he's the
the
GOAT.
GOAT.
He's the GOAT. I have a picture of him. He's the GOAT. So he wins at a high level. He's going to get top recruits, like no matter what.
Right.
It's Alabama. He wins. People want to win and compete for national championships. So I honestly don't think that's the reason, because people support Alabama, their fans, their donors, I suppose, and he's a great coach. So I don't think that's why. I think he just felt like it was time. Like he's proven a lot, and now he's an ESPN analyst, I believe. So he can just kind of talk about the game, and people will be interested to see that as well.
Yeah, I was really, really hoping that this had nothing to do with it. You know, it would make me really, really sad if he ended up retiring because of all of this. You know, because he had such a successful career, and he was just so good for so long. I mean, just the dynasty that he created at Alabama was incredible. And like, you know, it's kind of like an athlete exiting their sport. Like, you want to exit on good terms. Like, you want to be able to say when you're done, like, I'm content with what I accomplished. And, you know, he didn't end on a national championship. You know, he ended on an SEC championship, but he didn't quite make it all the way to the end. But I really, really hope he ended it because he wanted to, and because he was ready to be done and ready to, you know, move on to different things.
Exactly.
Other than just this NIL like,
and,
chaos.
And I was wondering, like, I honestly didn't think he was going to retire this year. I maybe thought he had like 1 or 2 more years, and I thought he would announce it. I feel like not all coaches should announce when they're retiring, be like, this is my last season before the next season.
Right.
But I think it would kind of, like, for people like him, the GOAT, I think it would have been like a fine way to celebrate his way out. But but that also talks to his personality and character. Like, he doesn't want all the attention on him. So that's respect to him too.
Yeah, absolutely. What a great guy, great coach. But it's always interesting to see when coaches like this come out on these big topics like this, just what they're saying. But anyways, on to the next thing I kind of wanted to talk about was how NIL impacts different sports. You know, like, obviously football and then both basketballs are like the highest earning NIL sports. You know, football, you know, some of these players will make upwards of, you know, several $1 million. You know, like we were talking about earlier, like Dalton Connect is one of the highest earning basketball players at like $700K. And then I think for Tennessee, Rakia Jackson is one of the highest for women's
basketball.
Yeah, and she's upwards of 100K.
I don't know exactly,
but
she probably does. Yeah.
So, you know, it's just interesting to see how these different sports are impacted. So, what's your experience with NIL?
NIL has been really special to me personally, especially since I've gotten to Tennessee and gotten involved with the collective, and then my NIL agent finding me, you know, smaller deals that I can do around the city of Knoxville. But it's been very special, you know, just to get out in my community, whether that's signing autographs for little kids, doing camps back home if I want to, which I might do this next summer. Just getting out in my community, because I really value, you know, little kids and who they look up to. Like, we're like superstars to them. So just doing that, whether it's taking pictures with little kids, donor dinners, just getting to know people. You know, relationships are really, really huge. So I think NIL has helped create more relationships with people, so it can help you in your future. But like you said, different sports are affected by different ways. I know, you know, being involved with, you know, USA basketball, I've met like a lot of the top players around the country. Played with Caitlin Clark, as everybody knows. She has a lot of, you know, deals and endorsements with, you know, Gatorade, Nike, Paige Beckers. I've known her competing with USA. Angel Reese, I've known her. So, you know, just, you know, sharing times with them, and obviously still communicating with them, texting them, and just, you know, appreciating what they do for our game of basketball and putting it on a higher level. But I think women's basketball has been very effective, as I told you, as you named, you know, 3 out of the 5 sports: football, women's basketball, men's basketball, softball, and gymnastics. And I saw a stat that said if you take out football, women's sports is actually doing much better than men's sports in NIL.
Which is crazy.
So just showing you what women can do around here.
Absolutely. And like, being in swim and dive, like I said earlier, like, I don't see a lot of that. Like, I'm not super impacted by NIL, but just being a female athlete, like, it's so cool to see how NIL has, like, you know, helped women's sports so significantly. You know, I was talking to somebody a couple weeks ago who told me that of, you know, the big 3 that I named, women's basketball is the most impacted by NIL for the draft,
Yes.
because the starting salary that women will make, in the draft, like in the WNBA, is almost equal to, if not lower than, what they'll make on NIL in college.
Right.
So more and more women's basketball players are choosing to stay in college and play because they can make more money, from NIL than they would in the WNBA, which I think is so cool.
Yeah, it is cool, and it's a lot of discussion that's coming up for this year, with the COVID year, people's fifth year that I have, that Paige has, that recently told that she's going to come back to UConn. She could have went top 5, top 3 in the draft, but she decided to come back. And I don't think that's specifically because of money, and I know her as a person. I just know, being at UConn, she got hurt one year, hurt her knee, and she wants to play with AZ Fudd, who I've also played with, who's a great person. And they kind of came together as like a package deal. So just her going back to UConn, playing and wanting to compete. But like you said, that extra COVID year and having people decide, should I stay one more year or not? NIL has been a huge factor. The WNBA has been growing, and like I told you, it's been growing exponentially, and it's a great league and one of the hardest leagues to make it in because of the lower amount of teams compared to the NBA that has 32. The WNBA has 12, so there's less roster spots for women to retain. But I think it's a very competitive league, and the money is growing because of the support, because of college women's baskeball, because of NIL. I think NIL has brought more attention to women's sports and has allowed people and athletes in a name, image, and likeness to grow, which is continuing to the WNBA and bringing more viewership there.
Absolutely. I mean, just the attitude towards women's sports just has completely changed.
It has.
I feel like in the last couple of years. And like when you really sit back and think about it, like, volleyball is not even one of the top 5 sports, but I feel like
it's
like
growing.
I know so many volleyball players that have that same NIL impact. Like,
exactly.
10,000, 12,000, 15,000 followers on Instagram just because NIL, just because they're volleyball players. And I'm like, this is so freaking cool to watch.
It's so cool.
It's
so cool. And I think people talk about it makes the sport less competitive. It doesn't.
No.
It makes it even more competitive.
Absolutely.
It makes it even more competitive because obviously teams are getting better. And I don't think there's super teams, honestly. You're seeing more variety of where people are committing to, wanting to beat top teams. So I don't think NIL is really affecting the competitiveness of the sport.
Well, that's really, really good to hear. NIL is so, like you said at the beginning, it's getting really, really controversial, but there are so many positive and negative impacts, that we're kind of seeing come out, but it's all centered on the people, the people and the decisions that they're making and the things that they're prioritizing. And, I just hope that, it's a can of worms. You can't put the worms back in the can now, but I just hope as we move forward, the emphasis will continue to be on the sport and on the competitiveness of the sport and just the love of the sport, and not focus on the money so much so.
Exactly. I agree with you and everything you said. So I really think that NIL is very beneficial to college athletes, and if they use it the right way, then we're only going to see it grow.
Absolutely. Well, that's all for today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you back here next week for episode 4.